After finally playing the Resident Evil 2 remake back in 2021, I had some expectations going into Resident Evil 4. After all, I've never played the original games, so I was expecting a similar experience between the two. An expectation that I cannot stress enough was completely wrong. With that being said, welcome to my review of the Resident Evil 4 remake. Starting off with something that I believe is a bit more subjective than most topics I'll talk about during this review. I personally believe the graphics in this game are a little underwhelming. Sure, it looks realistic, as I'm sure Capcom intended. However, an overwhelming majority of games nowadays have nailed that realistic look. So to me, that alone isn't impressive unless it's used in a meaningful way. For example, Metro Exodus is a game that not only had amazingly detailed graphics, but also has such a unique world and art style that the level design feels 10 times more impressive compared to the detail of Resident Evil 4 Remake. The issue with this game is that besides some minor exceptions, the world design is pretty flat and basic. Every zone, every building, even every room feels like it was designed to fit a generic checklist rather than actually catch your eye. This leads to the world feeling like it's just an arena to fight in rather than a visually stunning environment that you're exploring alongside the combat. However, one of the biggest examples of how this can be done better actually comes from Resident Evil 2 Remake. Despite the game looking obviously older and showing off the clear signs of Capcom's first remake trying to capture a realistic look, it does something that simply isn't mimicked in Resident Evil 4. That something is the lighting. Zones in Resident Evil 4 fall into two categories 99% of the time. They're either completely pitch black so you can't see anything besides what your flashlight is pointed at, or they're so flooded with lights that the impressive shadow work in this game is not shown off, even in the slightest. So we can compare that to Resident Evil 2 Remake. You have the moonlighting from the outside just barely illuminating the sections of the police station. You have the fluorescent lighting above you from the man-made lights, and both of those work to slightly illuminate the surrounding area while not getting rid of the darkness. This one change severely affects the atmosphere of the game, as it makes the player feel a sense of comfort when they really shouldn't. Why would a player be scared of the dark if everything around them is lit up by some faint nightlight that they can't see? There's no fear of what's in the darkness because you can see it. On a much better note, the animation quality of Resident Evil 4 is absolutely the best part about this game. Everything you do is fluid and has the appropriate amount of weight to it. The transitions from even steady walking to sprinting to jumping to crouching all feels fluid enough to make your gameplay feel responsive and immerse you in the character. Everything you want Leon to do, he can do without any sort of hitching or animation snapping involved. This is only enhanced when you play as other characters such as Ashley in the story, or Luis, Krauser, or Hunk in the Mercenaries mode. Ashley's movements clearly contribute to her role as the scared damsel in distress, while swapping over to Mercenaries to play Hunk makes you feel like you just turned into the god of death. This doesn't stop with just the movement or melee combat in the game. This also translates into the weapons you use. Shotguns feel heavy-hitting and truly fit to their role as the boss killer weapon, while pistols feel like the mid-power precision weapon that every survivor really needs. On the flip side, you have SMGs, which are weak bullet hoses that just flood the enemies with holes, and the rifles, which are basically strictly there for precision hits at mid to long ranges. Each of these weapons have the stopping power and animations to make them feel like they're not just different tools for the same jobs, they're unique enough to where you can find different situations throughout the game to use them. One weapon might be better than the other three, only to have that completely flipped around the next area you go into. Now, when it comes to story, Resident Evil 4 follows three plot lines at once, two of which are the focus of the base game, and one of which is seemingly the focus of the DLC. The issue is that the DLC is not part of the main story, meaning 33% of the game's story is immediately relegated to the sidelines. This is a problem because it is important to the main character of the story and a very important side character. That plotline, of course, is the story of Ada Wong retrieving the amber within the Las Plagas parasite inside it for Albert Wesker. In Resident Evil 4, that story is basically told through maybe 3 to 4 minute long cutscenes. These cutscenes basically consist of Ada Wong appearing on screen, speaking for a few minutes either with Leon or Wesker, then completely disappearing from the game until the next cutscene she shows up in. This not only kills any interest in this third plotline from the jump, because it simply isn't explained beyond Ada wants the amber because she was hired to get the amber, but it also ruins Ada as a character for the base game of Resident Evil 4. This is amplified by the voice acting for Ada feeling off at times. But I suspect that mainly has to do with how the dialogue was written, as although the voice actress did sound a bit bored at times, ultimately she was reading dialogue that is just very campy and robotic in its own right. Now, I suspect the complaints with Ada as a character will be fixed in the DLC that is coming, because it focuses entirely around her. But unfortunately, this isn't a review of that DLC. So, what of the other two plotlines? These are where the story shines for me, as the overarching goal of rescuing the president's daughter is always in the back of your head. As you continue throughout the game, it becomes more about stopping the Las Plagas victims from spreading their parasite to more of the world. But I'm getting ahead of myself, so let's talk about the main reason Leon is there in the first place, rescuing Ashley Graham. This story is my favorite out of the three the game is telling, because it is more character focused. You initially know nothing about Ashley, so when you first meet her as a player, you see her as somewhat of a burden. However, as you progress, she becomes more confident in your ability to protect her, while you become more attached to her as she's not only trying to help you where she can, but she can actively get more comfortable and skilled at helping you along your path to remove the parasites from your bodies. This comes alongside tons of back and forth quips, minor instances of flirting, and a few instances of Ashley actually saving Leon, showing that she isn't just gonna sit around and be some kid who needs a babysitter. That being said, I think the writing and voice acting for Ashley is a great balance of the damsel in distress attitude alongside the gameplay of a girl who is simply trying to help where she can. And as someone who's never played the original and didn't know anything about the character, I was honestly surprised when I looked up more about her and found out that she was actually 20 years old, when I figured she was just some 16-year-old girl, which, in hindsight, makes the flirting way less weird. While looking up more, I also found out how much she was hated in the original, so if that was ever a concern, trust me, the annoying part about her is that she's got the lung capacity of an ant, so you'll be hearing her pant a lot. Ashley, I need you to stop fucking moaning all the time. This is contrasted by Leon, who is portrayed perfectly, not only by his gameplay, as I mentioned before, but is also given a much more grizzled and experienced tone of voice. He's no longer some rookie cop who stumbles through trouble and makes it out alive by accident. This time he's trained, well-equipped, and a lot more confident because of it. Beyond his certainty in rescuing Ashley, he's also just given so many one-liners that you can't help but just laugh during some moments of gameplay. However, above all else, he's still just trying to help despite being forced into this job, which Ada even tells him during the later half of the campaign that he hasn't really changed. So, for the story of the Las Plagas parasite, it is really hit or miss, it seems. Some of the villains, like Sadler, do portray some level of genuine evil, which makes you not only slightly fear him, but also hate how much control he has over you during the story. However, this is contrasted with villains like Ramon and Krauser, who are just not great. Ramon is simply annoying. On his own, he isn't powerful, so by the time you reach his boss fight, you don't really feel anything for him besides disdain of his voice. Not because his voice acting is bad, but simply because the character is meant to be annoying. Leon even says, "You talk too much," right before his boss fight. As for Krauser, I thought it was just funny how many times he called Leon a rookie, despite Leon having 6 years of experience dealing with stuff almost exactly like the Las Plagas parasite. But beyond that, I just didn't see the point of him being there. Krauser's introduction is directly involved with the highlight of this plotline for me, Luis Serra. Luis, when you first meet him, is some cocky ex-Umbrella employee who simply dodges questions until it benefits himself. However, as you progress through the game, you start to really bond with the character. You learn about his past and why he's even helping you to begin with. I honestly wish we saw more of Luis, but without giving too much away for spoilers, that isn't gonna happen. However, I think before I move on, I would like to say Luis's voice actor carried the role here. I don't think anyone could have made Luis both disliked and liked at the same time, and I really did think he had the perfect level of snark in his tone that tied everything together for the character. So, bravo to him. I do have a slight issue with some of the enemy designs, but is also a problem I think all Resident Evil games have. So, we'll start off with the bad, then move into the good. The aforementioned bad is that there isn't too much variety with the enemies you fight. You have your normal infected who have the possibility of using different weapons, and maybe turning into some Las Plagas monsters. Then you have the special enemies like the chainsaw infected, the 2 to 3 different kinds of bull-headed infected. You have the priests during the castle sections who seemingly use magic to control you. You have the dogs of different kinds, the big ogres, the suits of armor, and finally the full-grown Las Plagas bugs. Although the main set of variety comes from the different weapons the infected can use, it still was a little disappointing that each fight felt like it was just more guys with weapons. I feel like there was a possibility this time to make enemies with a bit more distinction, seeing as this wasn't some zombie infection, it was a legit parasite that takes over people's bodies. I think the most unique enemies were the blind brutes in the castle section, but those you faced 3 times max, so I consider those to be kind of a mini-boss rather than a normal enemy. However, it is important to highlight that with the simplicity of the enemy design comes the ability to make every enemy look unique, which I can say that they did pretty well. Of course, you have models being reused, and it would be silly to expect every infected to look different. That being said, from location to location, those being in the village, castle, and island, each enemy has unique models based for their zone. For example, while the enemies in the village may be wearing normal clothing and have bloodshot eyes, those same enemies will look like white-eyed cultists inside the castle. Furthermore, the very same enemies will be wearing gas masks and helmets and vests on the island. This effect allows someone who isn't really concerned with fighting 20 plus different enemy types to traverse through the game without being fatigued from fighting the same old guy with one-handed weapons. One thing I do think that the game does perfectly balanced is the enemy density and difficulty. The game has this seesaw effect where some rooms have 1 to 2 enemies and other rooms are deliberately designed to overwhelm the player, surrounding them with upwards of 10 to 15 enemies at once. This back and forth allows the player to really use their equipment to the best of its ability. The game would be unbelievably impossible if every room had 10 plus enemies in it, while being extremely easy if every room only had 2 enemies in it. I only mention this back and forth because while in games like Resident Evil 2, you're given much less ammo to add to the fear being chased by a bunch of zombies, in Resident Evil 4, the game is designed to give you the opportunity to kill every enemy you come across while still not being completely screwed for ammo if you played it near perfectly. This also leads into things like challenges, and oh boy, has this studio become my favorite when it comes to bonus challenges. They have absolutely nailed this down to a science, no doubt in my mind. There are the basic challenges like getting the main story completed, defeating bosses, or even getting all the treasure or collectibles. Then, there are challenges like completing the game without the merchant, speedrunning the game and getting an S rank playthrough, or other perfectionist challenges. Now, the reason I believe this is so amazingly done is that these challenges reward the player with challenge points. These challenge points are used to buy bonus cosmetics, concept art, model figures for the game. They're basically used in the same way that the old Mortal Kombat points were. Sure, getting an 100% achievement completion mark on your game is always fun, but this seems like a much more rewarding way to give die-hard players a reason to continue playing again and again and again, while not boring them with the same stuff. Anyways, I think that's about all I can say about this game. Simply put, it's a game that goes above and beyond my expectations, and probably the expectations of many other players. I seriously cannot recommend this game enough, because despite its flaws, it was one of the best games I've played in the past few years, which is ironic considering it's a remake. For that reason, I am going to be giving Resident Evil 4 Remake a 9 out of 10, as this game could benefit from a bit of restructuring for the story elements, and perhaps a little bit more shocking visuals on the map design side of things, but overall is well worth the $60 you spend on it. which is more than I can say for a lot of the games coming out recently. So, for a remake to provide such an amazing experience, it's well worth it. I'd like to thank you all for watching. I really enjoy making these reviews, so it means the world to me that they have been performing so well. If you'd like to see my playthrough of Resident Evil 4, you can go onto my channel and find the full playlist there. New episodes will be released weekly until the game is fully uploaded. Beyond that, all my links to my socials are down in the description below, and I'd like to ask that if you enjoyed the video, agreed with any of my points, or simply like the sound of my voice, that you like the video and subscribe for future uploads. However, even if you don't, your viewership is plenty for me, so I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.